Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to the video. Welcome to my garage. In this video, we're going to be installing the upper link and making the connection point on the chassis side for the rear suspension of Wratchet, which is awesome because for the first time, the rear suspension is actually going to be movable. So working on something like this, just like when I was talking about designing this lower control arm, the first thing I want to do is work off of my fixed points. Now I've got the lower control arm. This is not my lower control arm, but this temporary mock-up of the lower control arm is holding me to the dimensions that the lower control arm will be. So I can still take dimensions off of this lower control arm. And remember, because I'm running the U-joint rear axle, my geometry for this rear suspension is equal, meaning the length of the lower control arm is going to be the same length as the upper control arm, so that the spindle always moves parallel with the mounting surface of the axle on this side. That way, wherever the suspension is in its travel, the angles on the U-joints will be the same, and this axle is phased, so it will cancel itself out in the vibrations. So in needing to make this upper link, I need to know where to install this, but most of the information is already here. So what I can do is I can take a measurement of how long the lower control arm is. So if I go from the center of the bolt to the center of the bolt, that's exactly 24 inches. And if I go the height from the center of this bolt to the center of this bolt, I believe that is I believe that is 10 inches. So then what I can do is I can make my upper link, which I did. I can make this upper link 24 inches. So from the center of this heim to the center of this heim is exactly 24 inches. So I'm going to mount this up there, and then I actually made a block of wood right here. And when I bolt this in here and lay it across the top, this piece of wood is the right height that it holds the upper link parallel with the axle and parallel with the lower control arm. So then, because that's 24 inches and this board is holding it parallel, wherever the heim ends up over here is exactly where that needs to be mounted. Alright, now I've got the upper link in place. This board is holding it so that it's running parallel with the axle and the lower control arm. So everything is parallel. Lower control arm is 24 inches center to center, and the upper link is also 24 inches center to center, and it's in line with the axle. So basically when you do that, and you come over here to the chassis, it is now defining where it needs to be. Like that upper link right there is telling you, this is where I need to be. In order for my geometry to be correct, that's where I need to be. So then looking at what I had to work with here, I'm going to mount a plate back here, and I'm going to have some tabs coming off of it to connect to the heim here. So this piece up here is going to make it so that I can mount my plate at a good elevation here. I've already measured this. This is the elevation it needs to be at. And then most importantly, I'll be able to take this piece to the other side and put it up in there the same way and make sure that these two plates are in the exact same location. And I want to use a backing plate here. I did add some material on the back here so that I can push it in to where this piece is on the back, and that way I'll get a consistent depth. And then I just hold that in place with some masking tape. And then I'm going to clamp this in place so that I can use it as a backing plate for the actual piece that I'm going to weld in here. This just gives me something consistent to push back on. Then I've got this piece just as a spacer, and this is my actual piece. So I put this spacer back here, I push it up against this piece, and then I push it up to the bottom of this piece. And then I clamp that in place. And then bring this back. And then I have made up the tabs that I need with the proper depth. I'm kind of speeding through some of this. There was a lot going on with taking my measurements and all that stuff, but I did that stuff throughout the week. So I'm trying to show you guys all this stuff at once. So I've got my tabs here. I also machined spacers so that I can spread the tabs out a little bit. If I put them right up against the heim, number one, it gets difficult to get welds on the inside there, and number two, it doesn't really leave you the possibility of putting any other type of joint in there. If you put something in there and then have some spacers, you can make some changes moving forward if you need to, and it also spreads out the load a little bit more on this piece here. So if I put this together, I wish I had a 9/16 nut that wasn't a lock nut so I could thread it all the way, but this at least holds everything together. And then if I push that in, that is what my finished product is going to be. All right, so here's my finished product. I've got the tabs on here. Nothing's tacked yet. That looks like that's pretty parallel to all that. I'll take some measurements to double check things, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this stuff off and I'm going to put some nice tacks on this plate, and then I'll be able to take a lot of these clamps off of here, and then I think I'll slide this back into place, check some measurements, probably do some real small tacks on here, and then I think I want to actually move the suspension a little bit, and I need to double check that the drive shaft isn't really compressing or extending at all, because if the suspension geometry is correct, then when this goes through its motions, the length on the drive shaft here should not change. So let's set the camera up and do some tacking and then clamp a couple more things into place. Alright, now I've got my tabs in place. I've got hose clamps holding it all in place so that it's ready to be tacked. Everything's centered up, ready to go. This tab is tacked in place, but I put my vice grips around this one to hold it a little bit tighter so that I can cycle this a couple times, and this will be a little bit difficult because this side is not really bolted to anything. It's just kind of floating in place, but I took a Sharpie and I marked where the axle goes into the slip joint here, and I'm just going to cycle this a little bit. I'm not going to go crazy or anything, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and make sure that it should stay pretty much right where it is. If I need to do any fine tuning, I'm not going to do it here. I think this is where it needs to be. When I actually do the lower control arm and I weld on these tabs, I can actually rotate these tabs a little bit up and a little bit down. So when I actually have the lower control arm in place and I've got tabs at that end and this end, and it's really, really solid, then I'll cycle it and I'll fine tune this so that I can get it so that the slip is not moving at all. But hopefully if everything went well, this won't really slip much at all, as long as I can rotate it and keep that from not pulling in or pulling out. Oh, that is heavy. that's heavy. All right, so that's good. It was really, really steady. You can see it moves a little bit if I can't keep that heim back there in place. But it was barely moving at all. Definitely not moving enough where I think that this isn't in the right place. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a couple of tacks on here so I can take my hose clamps off. All right, just like that, I have moving suspension. It's heavy. Oh, if I could come out here and just do some curls, this would be a workout. At the same time, it's awesome. All right, so upper link is now in place. Let me get this propped up here. Man, look how nice this stuff is coming out. I wish you guys could see this in person. I hope some of you guys get to see this in person someday. I'm really happy with how this is coming out. I'm a little bit afraid that I'm making it a little bit too beefy. Although my intention from day one on this chassis was to make it really be able to take a beating as compared to what Mahler can. So I'll see. I'm trying not to just throw metal on top of metal. I'm trying to make things multi-purpose and stuff, but I guess we'll see. The next video is going to be me making a cardboard or a wood mock-up of the lower control arm. And I know that this control arm is already a mock-up, but I'm going to be making a mock-up of the exact design of the lower control arm to see if it actually fits and works with the geometry before I build it. And at the same time I'm doing that, I'll be making a wooden mock-up of the upper shock tower so that I can also mock the shock absorbers up in place and see how all that's going to fall into place. So that's it for this video, guys. Got the upper link all set up, dialed in where it needs to be. Not going to solid weld things until all of the rear suspension is done and we know everything is where it needs to be. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope it's helping you guys with whatever you're working on, and I hope to see you on the next video. Take care.